Now, today marks the 20th anniversary of the signing of the peace agreement in Northern Ireland, a deal to share power between Republicans and Unionists and bring an end to decades of bloodshed called the Troubles. 2 decades on, and power hasn't actually been shared for over a year, with government buildings there stormed, shot over a standoff between the two main and opposing parties, the DUP and Sinn Féin. Brexit has also added to the political uncertainty of the region, with talk of a hard border being put back between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. But where is the society behind the politics? It has now 20 years of peace. Has that changed people's perspectives and indeed their culture? To give us an insight into that, we are joined on set by Declan Long, lecturer and programme director at the National College of Art and Design in Dublin, author of the book Ghost Haunted Land, which really looks at the visual art and how that has changed since the peace agreement. Thanks for your time. Firstly, let me start with that, Mr. Long. Has art changed since that peace deal? You know, art reflects culture. Because of peace, has it become less dark? What's changed?
The book, I suppose, talks about two things. It talks about the way in which art was changing during that period anyway, in relation to, for instance, the internet, in relation to various other transformations in how art is distributed globally and presented at art fairs and all of that. But it also then talks about the ways in which art shifts directly in response to the political developments and sometimes lack of developments. So the thing that I'm interested to some extent is that simultaneity of interesting engagement with global shifts and specific frustrated engagements with the local situation.
So in a way, opening up to the world both online and also having peace arrive, that sounds like a positive development. Does art look more merry, if you like, in the last 20 years?
It tries to sometimes by presenting positive images, alternative images of the society, showing things from different angles, from different perspectives, giving a sense of a much more plural society than the sense of two communities, divided society we've had for a long time. But at the same time, there are artists, very important artists, such as, for instance, the Derry artist Willie Doherty, whose work really quite stubbornly and sternly keeps us focused on the legacies of the conflict.
Because indeed, you mentioned he's a filmmaker and he has one film called Ghost Story, and it kind of runs in a loop, giving us the impression that nothing's really moving on in Northern Ireland.
That's right, and that everything, every new move, every step you take is still also haunted by what's unresolved in the past. This is one of the big problems about Northern Ireland today, is that there's so many things that people can't talk about. There's no possibility really of anything like a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because people don't really want an awful lot of the murky business of the past brought to light. So this means that there's a lot of things that for victims of the Troubles, for the population in general, which are just silenced. And so that comes through in a lot of the art as well, a sense of things that can't be seen, things that can't be brought into visibility in photographs or in films or whatever else.
Because when we think of Northern Ireland, notably of Belfast, part of the conflict was extremely visual, with those walls and those murals showing the feelings on both sides of the conflict. Have they started to fade, both literally on the walls and in people's minds?
No, I mean, really, there's a kind of re-emergence of some of those things. For a time, some of the murals, which isn't really necessarily a subject of the book, by the way, but those murals were beginning to be a little softer. There might be some more kind of, symbols that are less antagonistic. But a lot of that's coming back. There's a loyalist one which has been there for many years, which says, "Prepared for peace, ready for war," which is, it gives a sense of that ongoing tension which is ever present within the society.
And in another sense, there was talk of painting over them when the peace agreement was signed at first. But maybe that would be, a negative thing to do for a society. Is it not good in a way to be faced with the history?
We're absolutely fundamentally caught in that bind between what we should continue to remember and how much we should forget. And this is really the problem that happens in all post-conflict societies, the extent to which you can move on and leave the past behind, while also you can respectfully acknowledge the hurt, the difficulty that is important to many people in that society. So this is a real ongoing problem.
And of course, from the outside, we're all now looking at Northern Ireland and wondering if the peace, as you say, is lasting, if we're not going to go back into that cycle. Just to give us your perspective, how do you see current developments in Northern Ireland, notably with this Brexit on the table and the possible withdrawal from the UK from the EU?
Well, this is immensely difficult. This is a crisis of a new kind of intensity, which is in some ways an English problem, a problem with the England outside London, where that population has decided it wants to remove itself from the EU. But the majority of the people in Northern Ireland didn't vote to leave the EU. The majority of people in Scotland didn't vote to leave the EU. Wales narrowly voted to leave the EU. And Ireland has to deal with this decision. In Ireland right now, it's very difficult to even notice that you're passing through a border. There's almost nothing other than a change in what the road signs look like to give you an indication that you've moved from one territory into another. And the problem that, as you know, Brexit creates is what way in which might the outer limits of the EU be marked. The potential of what people talk about as a hard border, an actual infrastructure with security checks and customs checks and all of that, is so alarming in the context of a peace process that it's really hard to reckon with. And the importance of there being no manifest border of that kind can't be underestimated.
No, and as you say, it's difficult for maybe others outside to imagine. And very finally, when that power sharing came into effect, a lot of people in Northern Ireland were saying even that argument for United Ireland was somewhat diminished. It was out of date, people told me, because we were in a united Europe. Yeah. But on the streets of Northern Ireland, is that sentiment still there?
For a united Ireland, some people would say that's growing because of the desire to remain part of the EU. But I suppose at the moment, what a lot of people, I hope, are thinking about is the potential that still lies within the Good Friday Agreement for complexity, for multiplicity, that people might be able to be both English or British and Irish, one or the other, or both at the same time.
Indeed, which a lot of people are in Northern Ireland today. They have both. Declan Long, thanks so much for coming into studio and giving us your time. I know if you happen to be in Paris, Declan Long is giving a conference on the changes in culture and in visual art in Northern Ireland in those 2 decades in particular since that peace deal. Meanwhile, all reporters